Hello and welcome to Insiders, a podcast all about the world of television with me, Peter Fincham.
And me, Jimmy Mulville.
This is the podcast for people who love TV and who want to know a bit more about what goes on behind the scenes in show business.
Now, where are you, Peter? Because you're not in England, are you?
I'm in an island called Hydra, which is the island. It's famous for being where Leonard Cohen came in his early days and wrote songs and poetry, stuff like that.
Did. Yeah. In fact, he wrote "Bird on the Wire" there because he saw a bird. Literally, I always thought it was a metaphor, but apparently, they installed electricity and a telephone line in front of his house, and he saw a bird on a wire. So he wrote a song called "Bird on the Wire," and I thought, that's Leonard, you're just describing what you're seeing. You're not being a poet there at all. You're saying, I've just seen a bird on the wire.
One of his most famous songs called Suzanne, and it contains the line, "The sun pours down like honey on Our Lady of the Harbour," which I thought was about some beautiful woman standing on the edge of a lake in the harbour or whatever. It's in fact a rather unattractive church in Montreal called Our Lady of the Harbour.
Well, if we've got any listeners left after that story, we should crack on. By the way, did you see all over the media, and I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but apparently per head of population, Liverpool has more comedians than anywhere else in the UK. Just saying that. I don't know how many comedians Beckenham has got.
I don't know how you've got that from Leonard Cohen, other than just wanting to crowbar in this kind of statistic about your home city.
I was delighted to see that. It's a good upbeat story about Liverpool. Everybody's a comedian in Liverpool, people. As you know, we're all hilariously funny. All right. Anyway, enough of me bigging up my hometown.
Yes.
What are we going to talk about this week?
Well, I think we're going to talk the Netflix adaptation of Richard Osman's Thursday Murder Club dropped last week with a star-studded cast. Produced by Steven Spielberg's company. You won't be surprised to hear it's currently number one spot in the Netflix movie charts. And it's based on the book and the series of books, of course, by Richard Osman, which are textbook cozy crime, a phrase we might come back to in a minute. So we thought we might talk about the relationship between detective genres, crime and television.
I mean, there are two aspects to this I think we can discuss. One is, how popular crime is, and also cozy crime is now having a real moment, I think, that kind of, which we'll discuss what that genre is. And also the adaptation of IP, books, etc. into TV and how successful or not successful it is. But as you and I know, going into a broadcaster with a book that you want to adapt apparently is more of catnip for them than just going in with an original drama. But you created an original drama, didn't you, for Acorn? The Chelsea Detective.
Yeah, that's the Chelsea Detective, and we've just begun filming our fourth season.
How did that happen? Because I didn't. This is an unforeseen talent that you had, which I think is brilliant. That you sat down and wrote a successful crime series called The Chelsea Detective. How did that come about?
Well, it's a mystery to me as well, Jim. I don't know how it came about. I mean, in terms of
AI?
No, not at all. If you kind of look at it on a personal level, it was one of those things that we all reach this point when we think, what next, and what can I do that I haven't done before, rather than repeating what I have done before. And I'd become very, in my days as a commissioner, I've become very fascinated by this genre. Audiences always loved it. People who were kind of drama professionals didn't always love it. And I can remember, going back to when I was at the BBC, being told by the head of drama, a brilliant and very successful woman called Jane Trenter, one day, we're going to turn down this new series that stars Martin Shaw because it's too old-fashioned. It's cozy crime, and we don't want to do any more of that or something. And I said, well, hang on, before you turn it down, can I read the script? And I took the script home for the weekend and read it and thought, no, let's not turn this down. It was Inspector George Gently, which then ran for like 10 years. And I thought, if we turn this down, it'll go to ITV, it'll be a hit. But you had even then, and I totally understand it, a point of view of saying we need to do different things. We need to do kind of more challenging drama. We need to do drama that's got a harder edge to it, whatever phrases you want to use. And we do cozy crime because we know audiences like it, but it's not exactly our mission. Scroll forward about a decade later, and I was having a conversation with a man who worked at BBC Studios at the time called Toby de Graaf, who'd also been a colleague of mine at ITV. And I thought he was a very smart guy. And he said to me, there's a great appetite for British detectives around the world, but it's not being fed by the UK broadcasters because they're doing more challenging, kind of genre-bending drama, for totally understandable reasons. And so literally I went home and thought, well, maybe this is something I could do, because I was, looking for something new to do, having, done the things I'd done before, as it were. And that's how I came up with the Chelsea Detective. Now, I ought to be absolutely clear, I did not do it single-handedly. You work in a team. I worked with a brilliant producer who I've worked with ever since on it, called Ella Kelly, and also other writers, and particularly a key writer, Glenn Laker, who wrote the first episode. But we are on our fourth series now. It plays in, I believe, in over 40 countries around the world. So it has given me a big insight into this genre, and also perhaps really importantly, why when people develop a loyalty to it, the loyalty lasts a long time. It's one of those genres, we talked about this in relation to, say, panel shows, that it rarely has a moment of fashionability, but it also rarely disappoints viewers. So let me ask you, Jimmy, have you seen The Thursday Murder Club?
I have. I had lunch with Richard Osman about a month ago, and we've known each other for many, many years. In fact, he worked at Hattrick when he's a very young man and was a brilliant creator of formats. In fact, one of his formats is still running on Swedish television after about 30 years. And when I read his book a few years ago, it was just like having a warm bath. It was great, and it was set in a community which was, in a way, it was counterintuitive. It was old people, and he was reaffirming that old people are not to be put on the slag heap. They have things to say and things to do, and they have agency. But anyway, I have watched The Thursday Murder Club, and I did enjoy it. And it's different to the book. The book, I think the book, and we'll get on to this later, but the book is its own thing, and the film is its own thing. And as Richard said, he enjoyed the film because he had nothing to do with it. He kind of let go of it, and in a very intelligent way. He thought, I'm not going to have any opinions about this film. The filmmaker will do what they want to do with it. And Chris Columbus, who obviously did all the Harry Potter films, he was the director, so it looks great. And I'm not surprised it's number one in the charts, because people love. What's not to like about sitting down in front of a whodunit? We set up a company with Jed Mercurio called Hattrick Mercurio, and we do slightly more gritty dramas like Trigger Point on ITV, which is Vicky McClure, and she's kind of she's on the trail of these awful people who are blowing up London every week. But that gets an audience of nearly 8 million a week.
Yeah, let's just go back, because I don't think we've spoken about it very much, to Jed Mercurio and your partnership with Jed Mercurio, how that came about, because I know it's not about Line of Duty, is it? Am I right in thinking mentored other writers to write, sort of, I don't want to say similar sort of drama, but drama that kind of sails under his banner, if you like. So tell us about
the writer of the current doing two series back to back at Trigger Point as we speak. And we're doing 12 episodes of that this year. That's written by a man called Chris Brandon, who Jed actually met, and we developed a show called Bloodlands, which was starring Jimmy Nesbitt, which we did a couple of series of, and it was brilliant. A brilliant show. It didn't come back, but nevertheless, it kind of blooded Chris. Chris is a very good writer and an actor, actually, but he's got it. Whatever it is that you need, he's got it. And he was discovered, if you like. I'm not saying he was discovered by Jed, but he's definitely mentored by Jed. And Jed is very good at that. He is incredibly generous. He doesn't overwrite. He doesn't even, it'd be easy to say, well, I'll take this script and I'll just zhuzh it up and punch it up, but he doesn't. So, and we have a team here as well at Hattrick Mercurio of, some very good executive producers, some fantastic developers. So there's a kind of pipeline where ideas are being developed all the time. Unfortunately, we're talking about the crime genre. The crime genre is the most popular genre in modern television, isn't it? And I think that if you look at the amount of episodes of popular drama that get made every year, it's hundreds of hours. I mean, just going back over the history, I mean, Midsomer Murders has done 140 episodes. Death in Paradise, 116 episodes. Even shows like Father Brown, which couldn't be cozier, is 130 episodes. Poirot, 70 episodes. And in America, it's even more ridiculous. You've got Law and Order, 573 episodes. Hawaii Five-0, 282 episodes. Blue Bloods, 293 episodes. It's just the appetite for them is extraordinary. So, I don't know whether Jed calculated that at the beginning of his writing career, but because he started off writing a show called Cardiac Arrest.
Medical, because he was a doctor, wasn't he? Yeah.
Jed was a doctor. Jed said he wanted to be a doctor because he could, when he was a kid growing up, it felt quite watching drama, medical drama. They were the heroes, and they obviously were very attractive figures. Then he became a doctor and realized the TV medical drama had little to do with what it was like to be a real doctor. So he wrote a very funny and honest show called Cardiac Arrest of what it was really like to work in an NHS hospital. And then he went on to write a show for us called Bodies. Now, interesting, that was a book. I just realized that was a book called Bodies. Was it a book
that he wrote or somebody else wrote?
Jed hit a kind of patch where he was writing shows that weren't being picked up. In his frustration, he thought, sod it, I'll start writing some novels. So he's written a couple of very, very good novels. One of them was Bodies, which was picked up by Mark Redhead here, who's an executive producer in our drama department that we had. And he said, I just read this book by Jed Mercurio. It's brilliant. And he got Jed in and he said, it's not a one-off, it's a series. This is definitely a series. So that's how we got to know each other. And then he wrote a show called Critical, which landed on Sky. And it was brilliant with Lenny James. And then we had lunch and he just said, look, I'm thinking of setting up a company. Would you like to do it with me? And I said, well, if I'd known that before I booked Scott's, I would have booked McDonald's. And I just think that Cozy Crime now, I've seen that the BBC have launched Ludwig, which has a comedian at the centre of it.
Yeah.
And then and then another show called, is it Death Valley with Timothy Spall?
Which has Timothy Spall, yeah.
Who is a great actor, but he's a great comic actor as well. And he's got a drollish kind of figure. At the centre of it, often there's a kind of humorous tone to it. And we've just done a drama called How to Get to Heaven from Belfast, which Netflix has announced, written by Lisa McGee, who did Derry Girls. At the centre of it are three friends, three women in their 40s who've known each other forever, and these three people get involved in solving a crime which is so heinous and so awful, and yet at the centre of it, three very funny women. So the collision of the humour and the jeopardy is really compelling, and it's very entertaining. And I think that's what's happening now, is people want to be entertained. I kind of worry sometimes that when the BBC in particular does a drama which feels worthy, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. It's how you do it. Look at Netflix with Adolescence. It focused on something very, very, very important, which is happening in our society, but did it in a brilliant way, which you couldn't stop watching. But I do worry sometimes when I see a drama, I think, you know what, it's kind of I just don't want to watch it again. I don't want to come back to it. I need to be entertained. And I think more and more audiences want to feel that they're escaping into something which they know is going to be a safe experience, that they're going to go on a journey with three people that they really like, they're really falling in love with them, and at the end of it, it's all going to be all right.
I mean, I think the thing of comedians in detectives, there's a long history of this. One of ITV's most successful series for years was Touch of Frost. Do you remember Touch of Frost?
Yes,
with
David Jason.
I don't think before Touch of Frost, David Jason had ever done anything that wasn't fundamentally comic. But he brought his comic persona into a serious drama, and it worked brilliantly. I mean, it's not that different from comedians doing travelogues and doing straight factual, having done, or Bob Mortimer Paul Whitehouse going fishing or whatever. There's some relationship here, and I think if you go back, he wasn't actually playing a detective to Robbie Coltrane in Cracker. Cracker was an absolutely brilliant series from the 1990s, maybe the early 2000s. But Robbie Coltrane prior to that was known entirely for comedy, and I don't know quite why this is, but it is true, and I would say audiences like in this genre to feel that there's some sort of underlying comic sensibility, even though, the business of murder is quite serious. I think if they're simply po-faced and without humor, then they're normally slightly lesser things. I mean, a very obvious and highly successful example in the modern age of what I guess you'd put, under the banner of cozy crime is Only Murders in the Building. You've got, it's a very high American production values, a lot of money thrown at it, obviously brilliant casting. And then you come up with something that's got its own unique flavor. It's definitely an entertainment. You couldn't possibly call it worthy.
The other aspect of this is adaptations. Richard, I think, let go of it. He didn't want to. I think Richard could have written the movie. I've read some of the screenplays that he's written, and he's a very, very, very good writer. So he could have written it. He didn't want to. He likes writing his books, and he's also a producer. So he quite wisely just let them get on with it. Now, a lot of novelists will do they'll speak out against the film and saying, "Oh, I hate this film. It's wrecked my book." And there is a theory that the better the book, the harder it is to turn into. Remember A Year in Provence? What a bestseller that was.
Yeah. But that wasn't in this genre. So
it wasn't in this genre, but it was a book adaptation with John Thor and Lindsay Duncan, who were the two biggest stars on television at the time. And it was shit. It was terrible.
I'll tell you what would be an interesting thing to research, and maybe they will research it. You're going to have two different groups of people who watch this film on Netflix, people who read the book and people who haven't. I wonder whether the appreciation scores will be higher from people who have than for people who haven't, or vice versa. You could imagine both. If you've read a book and it's dear to your heart, you are slightly inclined to think, well, it's not the book that I imagined when you see the adaptation. But not necessarily. Yeah. They may be absolutely loving it.
I read the book and I saw the film, and I enjoyed both. I think I probably enjoyed the book more because I just think that Richard is a very good writer, and he painted that world very well, and the characters, their thought processes. I think I just enjoyed it slightly. But having said that, I thought the film was a very good version of the book. So I kind of think that either, if you're in either camp, I think you'd enjoy the film. I don't think it's one of those things where you say they've wrecked the book. Like, for example, when the BBC did War and Peace. They're on a hiding to nothing, aren't they? Even though they peppered it with very good people like James Norton, it ends up feeling a bit soapy, and not the great novel by Tolstoy. So TV has a habit of that. They did a version. We're talking about adaptations of Bleak House years ago at the BBC.
That was when it was commissioned before my time, but it arrived when I was just become the controller.
Oh, did it? Okay. Yep. So I thought it was brilliant. And they did it as a soap opera. Half-hour versions, with Gillian Anderson, Timothy West. It's a fantastic cast. And of course, Dickens wrote in that rather breathless way. So each episode had a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of it, because that's the way he used to write. And in a way, I thought that's perfect for the BBC. Then they never did it again. You never recommissioned another Dickens
I can't remember
drama.
I can tell you about a story about that, because it was very soon after I arrived, and I heard various mentions of this Bleak House kind of adaptation, and there was a kind of worried air about mentions. Some of the things that I heard mentioned, which made me think, oh God, has it gone horribly wrong? So I asked the same person I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Jane Tranter, the head of drama, if I could take a couple of tapes home and watch it one weekend. And I did. And I remember I came in on the Monday morning and sent her a note or email or whatever. saying, "Why the long faces? This is absolutely brilliant." And she said, "Oh God, we were just worried because you're the new controller. We worried what you might think of it." And it was plainly brilliant. Why was there no follow up in that particular form? I can't believe there wasn't some development, but things moved on and it never happened. It's not as if there haven't been plenty of Dickens adaptations.
Well, I was going to say,
just as been plenty of Jane Austen adaptations. They literally come round on a fairly regular basis. But to just go back to this in relation to kind of our theme of the week here, cozy crime, are you better to adapt a book, or are you better to come up with something original? I think the answer, there's no clear answer, and it's fairly obvious what you might say about it. If you adapt a book, a very well-known book, you've got a great announcement, and we're always saying this. People are swayed by great announcements. So Thursday Murder Club, when Steven Spielberg bought the rights, you've got a ready-made headline there. You're going to write about that. Whereas a brand new show that doesn't come from anywhere is harder to get, people to be aware of it, to become aware of it. Yeah. But the best drama I commissioned, let's just stick with ITV at the moment. Downton Abbey, not crime, but Downton Abbey, a good example of Unforgotten by Chris Lang, brilliant writer. Broadchurch by Chris Chibnall, crime series by people called Chris. They are completely original and aren't based on any books at all.
As is Line of Duty.
As is Line of Duty.
Which was the most watched show this century so far in that genre.
Yeah.
So the data would point to the fact that in outcome, when the audience sees these different shows, the idea that it's based on a book or it's an original drama is not significant. That the fact is that the audience will choose what they like and watch that show. But it's in the selling. It's in the selling of the show that the IP is important, because the truth is that we talked about this before. When you're pitching a show, anything you can do to reduce the level of uncertainty and fear in the room about, am I making the right decision? If it's based on a famous book, they go, oh, yes, I read that book. And yes, no, I think that's a great book. Yeah, we can definitely see that. Whereas actually, we were pitching a show, Jed and I were in Los Angeles pitching a show, which was an original drama that he'd created. And they loved it. And they said, you know what? It's a shame it's not a book, because if it was a book, we'd immediately commission this. So Jed came back, and with a co-writer, Prasanna Pranaraja,
quickly wrote a book.
They wrote a graphic novel.
Really?
Of the book, and now we're out with the graphic novel, because we think, all right, fine, but if that's your game, these are your rules. We'll play by your rules, and we'll just go on the long journey. So he came out and knocked out a book. So it's in the selling that the IP is important. Yes. I don't think that in reality, whether, like you said, the Chelsea Detective is not based on a novel, but you're now writing a novel about the TV series.
So it'd be interesting to see. I don't know whether it'll even ever get published, but I'm writing a Chelsea Detective novel, and in a way, you're doing things the other way round there. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see whether the franchise of the Chelsea Detective, with its loyal audience and growing audience, therefore kind of gives the novel some sort of launch momentum. But having said that, obviously it'll only work if it's a good novel. So and then I think it'd be very, very unlikely to then adapt that novel for television, because it'll if it does work as a novel, it'll run on parallel tracks, if you like, and just as there's a very loyal audience for television crime drama, there is for novel crime drama. But you've got to get there's a lot of crime drama. Crime novels written that don't really get much attention, don't get much read. You've somehow got to get people's attention and get out there ahead of the pack, and that lies a long way down the track for what I'm doing. But it's a kind of interesting thing, the relationship between the two things. I can tell you it's extremely interesting as a writer, because you have completely different both advantages and disadvantages, enormous advantages. When you're writing for television, you are endlessly thinking about production realities, budgets, schedules, numbers of characters. You've got a location that you want to set a scene in, and so a voice in the back of your head says, if we're going to that location, it'd be good if there were 2 scenes in it, because then we'll get more use out of it. It'll be a good day's filming, if you like. You can't not be thinking about these things. Obviously, with a novel, you can go anywhere you like and have as many characters as you like. That's both a liberating thing, but it also has its own dangers, because you need to keep a tight focus. And obviously, Richard Osman, to go back to Richard Osman, which is where we started, it's very tightly focused around this place, Cooper's Chase. It has a precinct, and people like a precinct, and they like to know where they are, and they like a world with characters who are identified with that world. And if you set about writing a Richard Osman style novel that didn't have that constraints, it would be interesting to see whether that was more effective or less effective.
Of course, people love books, and and people get very attached to books. And Agatha Christie, of course, has her own fan base. Yes. And Agatha Christie is probably the most mined book over the last. You think since she started writing those books, the iterations of the Miss Marples and the Poirots and and the most recent iterations have been on the BBC, written by a writer called Sarah Phelps, and Sarah Phelps actually changed the murderer in one of the books.
I mean, I agree. It does seem incredible that you could do that with Agatha Christie without enraging the loyal fan.
It did enrage people. I mean, some people said it was an interesting way of contemporizing Agatha Christie and turning it not from just a whodunit into a psychological thriller. And some people just thought it was a fucking cheek. Right? So some people just thought, why are you messing around with Agatha Christie? Yeah. But of course, I think it also speaks to the fact that a modern drama department looks at Agatha Christie and thinks, it's a bit of a puzzle as opposed to a psychological. We need to identify with the victim.
It's not Shakespeare. It's not even Jane Austen, if you like. So I mean, obviously, there is no Agatha Christie is not around to say, yes, that's a better idea for who the murderer is. But there are people representing her estate who must have been happy to take those liberties.
Oh, they gave permission. Well, because they're going to make money out of the version. It was called Ordeal by Innocence. And
okay. Was it only that one though? I got a feeling there's a
No. She changed the tone of all of them. She's changed the killer. In the original version, it was Kirsten Lindstrom, the family housekeeper. It's so delicious, isn't it? In those days, of course, every family had a housekeeper. And then in the new version, she turns it into Bill Nighy. He's not called Bill Nighy, it's the actor, playing Leo Argyle, the father, the adoptive father who killed his wife. And the motive is rooted in the control and abuse within the family by the father, the coercive control of the man. So it absolutely resonates with all the modern kind of, I'm going to use the word tropes, because the drama department says, no, we can't just have a whodunit. We've got to have something which resonates with our audience. And I thought it was a really good drama, but it pissed off the Agatha Christie people who didn't like it one bit.
But maybe the BBC were also thinking you can't suggest that the housekeeper goes around murdering somebody. It needs to be one of the posh people up.
It's got to be a posh white bloke who is the villain. And absolutely, I completely agree with that.
Well, look, Jed Mercurio, what a successful career, and long may it continue. And good luck to the Thursday Murder Club. I don't think it needs any good luck from us, does it? It seems to be flying, and I'm sure.
I wonder whether they'll do. Here's the question, and maybe we should leave it on this. I wonder whether they will do any more of them. I actually think that the Thursday Murder Club would also make a good TV series, because actually, it feels to me like it is cozy.
But there's nothing to stop that happening in due course, and sooner than you might think. After all, they just started embarking on Harry Potter as a TV series. It's not that long ago that they made the movies. They did it with Lord of the Rings, not so successfully with Lord of the Rings. They didn't kind of satisfy people with Lord of the Rings. But of course you can then go from, this kind of triangle, if you like, from book to film to TV to TV to film to book. I reckon you can go around this triangle in any order that you like. And if you get it right, people will be happy. And it's surprising how little time needs to pass since the last, go back to, say, Jane Austen, since the last Pride and Prejudice, before there's an audience ready to have a new Pride and Prejudice. And I think that probably the same is true with crime. So, come back to what I was saying right at the very beginning, that I remember having this conversation about a series that turned out to be very successful, the George Gently, Inspector George Gently. And the feeling at that time, about 2006, 2007, was that cozy crime was a bit old-fashioned and we were moving on from that. The notion, this is maybe a general point about television, do we ever move on from anything? Or do we move round in circles, waiting for people to give something a fresh lick of paint, rediscover it, give it a modern twist, and then we fall in love with it again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Think the latter is more true than the former.
I completely agree. And if Richard Osman has any spare time and listens to this podcast, Richard, Peter and I are not pitching to do any TV adaptation of your books. We're not that crass. But you have my number, you have my email. I'm sure you've got
punch recently, which I didn't.
No, I'm really pleased for him, and I think it's been a very good experience. The film version. So when are you back from your holidays? Are you gonna?
I'm back next week. I'll be in the studio next week with my tan fading. The main thing is I've had to turn the air conditioning off for the purposes of this recording, and the temperature has been going up steadily. So if we talk for much longer, you'd see sweat pouring down my face. So maybe I'd better go off and jump in the pool. You'd better go and stand in the rain. You're off to New York. Work or holiday?
Yeah, because we're about to launch the third season of Have I Got News for You on CNN on Saturday.
Well, look, we haven't talked about any
I'm worried that Donald Trump may incarcerate me because he's now
might be in Salvador with your head shaved this time next week.
He's now threatening to shut down Seth Meyers, who does the late night talk show. He's become obsessed with late night comedians. Anyway, and South Park. Enough of that. Have a good rest of your trip, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Are there any questions about the world of television you've always wanted to ask? Send them our way. We'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email and get in touch via our socials. All the info is in the description. If you enjoyed the show, please do follow Insiders, the TV podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
Or even better yet, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel?
Thanks for listening.